Please be seated. Today we come with heavy hearts, alongside those in our parish family and all over the world who are of Armenian heritage, to remember the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the Armenian genocide. Or, for many of us, not necessarily to remember, but to learn of it for the first time, as it has been a largely ignored, if not at times hidden, event. On April 24th, 1915, the Ottoman government arrested approximately 250 Armenian intellectuals and leaders, beginning what would end in the deaths of between 1 and 1.5 million Armenians by 1917. The Turkish government contests the use of the word genocide, claiming instead that the deaths were not systematic, but casualties of war and disease. The United States still has not agreed to call these mass deaths a genocide either. But they do not deny that 1 million or more Christian Armenians of every age were murdered by burnings, drownings, drug injections, and toxic gas exposure, and those who survived often forced to flee from their historic homeland, creating Armenian diaspora communities across the world. Our readings today might, for some, coincide quite well with our remembrance of this most horrific event. The Acts reading holds out Christ as the only way to salvation, condemning as other and unredeemable the Muslim Ottomans who perpetrated such acts of horror. And our epistle and gospel passages appear to encourage us to lay down our lives for each other, our fellow Christian sheep, that we might continue to abide in God's love. Don't just preach about it, we might hear in the first letter of John, do it. Take care of each other. Is it that simple, though? For me, it isn't. For me, the conclusions I just drew make me very uncomfortable. Because acting in God's name, acting from our own sense of being called, of wanting to witness to the divine love within each of us, whether we call that love Allah, Christ, Adonai, Shiva, or by the myriad other understandings of the divine that our multi-religious world contains, is never straightforward. It is never uncomplicated. It is never something that can be done with certainty. It is, as 1 John notes, something that can only be done in truth. Truth, that entity that moves and morphs with each new experience, across each unique perspective, within each relationship. Well, we might say, that's a very conservative reading of our scriptures today. What if we were a bit more liberal in our definitions of brothers and sisters, of sheep? Then wouldn't the readings just call us to act in love toward God's creation, just as Jesus did? Wouldn't they just ask us to be willing to give up things that are important to us for the sake of others? That should certainly preach on a Sunday where we revisit the horrors of mass killings. Well, yes. And still, as I got to thinking about all this, I realized that even that, loving others, acting in love for others, is not simple. And it is rarely something I do with a feeling of certitude. So what does it really mean to lay down our lives for others? To love in truth and action, not just in word or speech. As most of you know, before I came to seminary, I had a career as a health research scientist. My my research focused on understanding the causes and consequences of obesity. I loved my work, not just because it was an incredible outlet for my passionate intellectual curiosity, but also because I really wanted to make a difference in the world, and I could see ways in which I was. It all seemed so simple. Fat tissue was a problem, and I wanted to help solve it. My colleagues and I in the obesity research community around the country identified that people of color, people with little education and few financial resources, and people under stress were most likely to develop obesity in the US and to suffer its adverse consequences. Great, we all thought. Now we can direct prevention and treatment resources to these groups who need it. As I have gotten some distance from that world of research, though, I've begun to wonder about just how simple it was. The labeling of obesity as a medical condition, though intended to create services and enhance prevention, has also created prejudice. And not just some simplistic, self-contained prejudice, were there such a thing, but a nasty, snowballing prejudice that has built upon racism, classism, and misogyny. It has, for one very small example, opened the door for our communities to feel justified in arguing that a person living below the poverty line, most likely in this country to be a Black woman and her children, knowing that calories matter more than anything else as she accompanies her children through hunger, should not be using her limited food stamp dollars to purchase fat and salt-rich foods, foods that have a big calorie bang for their buck. My research, despite my desire to highlight women, Blacks, and those in poverty so that resources might be diverted to them, has, in a real way, enhanced their oppression. What did it really mean for me, a white, upper middle class, highly educated, thin woman, to bring herself to the study of obesity? Did I really lay down my life for another? Did I really lay down my own experience, my own perceptions and assumptions, my desires for my own life, to meet those desires in another? I imagine that my research career might have been substantially different had I begun it not by focusing solely on the science of appetite and fat accumulation, but by learning far more broadly, investigating the sociology, anthropology, psychology of those who struggle with their weight. I am not saying that my research did nothing good and was at its heart a tool of oppression. I am saying that loving in truth and action is complicated. And I am wondering whether, if I had taken more seriously 1 John's exhortation to lay down my life, whether my research career might have had a far more powerful divine witness than it did. I tried to love in action, but I am not sure I tried to love in truth. I loved only in my truth. But truth, as I said earlier, moves and morphs with each new experience, across each unique perspective, within each relationship. I've begun asking these questions of my own life in part because of the very good modeling you all have done by asking these questions here in this community. A few weeks ago, we heard of the experiences of our missioners to Haiti, and we heard them, in many different ways, ask the question, what does it mean for us, a primarily US-born congregation of working and middle-class means, to bring ourselves to the service of those in Haiti living in poverty? We have, in many wonderful and courageous ways, laid down our lives for these others. Our missioners have put aside work and family obligations, given their time, their talent, their emotional and spiritual selves to this work. And we, the congregation, have laid down our shared life to support them, giving time and resources to fundraising, items for the trips, spiritual and emotional support as well. We have loved in action. But as some of you have asked, how might we love more fully in truth? What assumptions from our own context have we continued to bring to our preparation, experience, and post-trip processing? What perspectives and experiences could we set better aside as we continue discernment about next steps? How might we engage the truth of the Haitian people we so desperately want to serve in ever richer ways, so that our loving action in Haiti might be an even more powerful divine witness than it already is? Looking back 100 years to the atrocities of the Armenian genocide, the loving action that was called for may seem simple, clear, certain. And yet, as we have observed with our communal work in Haiti, and also as individuals confronted daily in our news and experiences with the oppression of those around us because of their color, nationality, religion, how to respond in truth and love is rarely clear or simple. I don't point this out to paralyze us, to make us so fearful of acting that we do not act. Rather, I call us to continue our good work, to be a community who reflects just as much as we act, and acts just as much as we reflect. I call us to be courageous enough not just to simplify each other's lives, but to complicate them. To really call each other into action as Christ's body in the world, and into thoughtful evaluation of the motivations, perspectives, and assumptions we bring to that action. Where do you feel God calling you or calling us to loving action? And how will you lay down your life to carry it out in truth?